Do you guys feel like the game just knows? Like, it knows exactly what you need in order to win the game, or more importantly, it knows exactly what your opponent needs for lethal? Let's put on some tinfoil hats and talk about some Hearthstone conspiracies. Before I begin this video, I just want to say that this is not in any particular order. I made a Twitter post actually about Hearthstone conspiracies, and some people left some very interesting responses. So pretty much all this video is going to do is to highlight some of those and get us talking about some Hearthstone conspiracies. And before we begin, I just want to point out that 75% of you guys that watch these videos are actually not subscribed to the channel. So if you do enjoy the content that you're watching, feel free to drop a subscription because we'd love to have you be part of the community. And we're also aiming to make daily videos, so hopefully we'll be able to keep you guys entertained. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the Hearthstone conspiracies. The first one is definitely going to be something I believe everyone will agree with, is that you will always queue into your worst matchup after you switch a deck. As a memer, I can definitely believe this conspiracy because I play a lot of combo decks that have a very specific damage output. Usually 30 is that magic number when it comes to creating OTK decks, and well, if I go up against a warrior or a druid or any class that's able to gain massive amounts of armor, unfortunately, I'm just not able to kill those kind of archetypes. And usually, whenever I'm playing a deck that has very limited damage, guess what's coming into play? Lots of druids and lots of warriors. And sadly, this is just all too common. You see it everywhere on streams, whenever you see your friends play, and especially whenever you see yourself queue into any kind of ranked mode. Because unfortunately, I just feel like Hearthstone code just knows when to screw with you and when to eventually give you your high rolls, but a lot of the time it's just screwing with you. The next conspiracy is actually the most liked one on the post, and that's coming from the Grandmaster caster himself, Darrock Brown, where Psychic Scream is 100% bugged to shuffle the cards to the top of your deck. And unfortunately, this is another one that I have to agree with because I played competitive Hearthstone back when this card was in standard rotation, and I gotta tell you, there were so many situations where I played Psychic Scream specifically to get rid of like one minion, such as like Lich King being that really hefty minion that you had to kill immediately, and every single time I would Psychic Scream that back into the deck. Guess who would come back out the exact next turn? It would be Lich King. But yeah, that's like case in point textbook definition to where like as soon as you play this card against like the one minion that you honestly played the card against, it immediately comes back down. Like this was back in the days of Shutterwalk. So like say your Shutterwalk opponent ends up missing or low rolling the Shutterwalk, but you have no way of killing everything, so you just kind of have to Psychic Scream it back into the deck, otherwise you're dead. And then suddenly Shutterwalk just gets drawn yet again, so it's like, unfortunately, Psychic Scream did have a lot of meta applications and honestly screwed over a lot of decks, but in the games where it was most viewed, it seemed like Psychic Scream was bugged to some degree, so who really knows how this card works? And to be honest, when it comes to shuffling as a mechanic on Hearthstone, we just don't really know a lot about the electronic media of the game. And I'm more so saying that because when it comes to card games as a whole, you can at least like pull out the deck and be like, oh, okay, so if I had this many turns, I could have drawn this card, or it took this many draws in order for the Psychic Scream minion to be drawn. But unfortunately, when it comes to Hearthstone, unless your opponent literally spares you, you just don't have the same luxury. So because of that, I believe that Psychic Scream will always shuffle the card that you want most into the top of your opponent's deck because, let's face it, this is Hearthstone after all, and the game is out to get you. Up next will probably be the aggro master strategy, and that is it is 2 times more likely to top deck lethal if your hand is empty. So to all the Face Hunter players, to all the aggro burn shaman players that used to play back in the day, this one probably rings especially true for you. This one is probably less of a conspiracy and more of result-oriented thinking, but if you really apply it, isn't it pretty funny how every single aggro deck that you go up against just happens to top deck that kill command, top deck that crackle, or in Demon Hunter situation, top decking Twin Slice and Lapidary every single time that they need it? Because unfortunately, it still feels like aggro decks have exactly what they need every single time in order to kill you by like turn 5, turn 6. But as someone who has fought a lot of Face Hunter back in the day, it is really frustrating in order to say that I have lost several times to a top deck kill command. And unfortunately, with how much I hate Face Hunter, I'm more inclined to believe this because there's just a lot of times where I feel like the game knows that, hey, this guy just needs 3 more damage. Let's give him exactly what he needs to win the game just to make the other player more frustrated. The next conspiracy theory is actually one that I've never heard of before, but it's coming from Grandmaster herself, Bloodyface. She is saying that Tinkmaster Overspark is not a 50-50. I tried it in an Odd Paladin, and 11 times in a row, I played it and it either made a 5-5 for my opponent or a 1-1 for me. 11 times. So before recording this video, I actually played Tinkmaster Overspark a decent amount of times in order to see, you know, just how likely it is in order for your opponent to get a 1-1 or a 5-5. And unfortunately for you, Bloodyface, I gotta say that I played Tinkmaster a total of only 3 times, and I actually managed to turn my opponent's minions into 1-1s both of those times. So maybe this is just some Grandmaster luck. Maybe this is because I was playing in casual, because like if you're telling me, Bloodyface, that you did this in ranked, and this happened to you consistently in ranked, then maybe the conversation is, especially in ranked, the game knows exactly what outcomes to rig. And if that's definitely the case here, then it doesn't matter how many casual games that I play. So even though that I hit 2 out of the 3 times that I played Tinkmaster into my opponent's minion and made it into a 1-1, contradicting to what Bloodyface is saying here, I still think that there is maybe a valid conspiracy here. But really, I guess like the biggest conspiracy to play into that would be what's the difference between casual mode and ranked mode when it comes to the coding of the game. Because maybe, just maybe, the game is more likely to give more exciting outcomes to the ranked mode to give more people incentive to either keep queuing or to just keep playing the game in general. But until then, Bloodyface, I'm just gonna have to say that unfortunately, this might just be a case of some Grandmaster luck, and until we see some more examples, I'm gonna have to decide that there's nothing wrong with Tinkmaster Overspark, but maybe there's something wrong with the coding of ranked ladder in general over casual. This next one is going to go towards all the deck builders and meta breakers out there in the Hearthstone community, but is that important cards are programmed more frequently right after they're being added into the deck. So in case you guys are a little bit confused on this wording, pretty much what he's saying here is when you're experimenting with cards and when you're trying out different strategies, more so strategies that are very dependent on specific cards, the game is very more likely to give it to you so that way you can actually, you know, play the fun aspects of your deck versus just playing a deck that has a subpar win con. And you could also make an argument that maybe this is just talking about important cards as a whole, not just when you're switching and testing out and experimenting with stuff. But, you know, let's just take Evolve Shaman, for example, where the game knows that Cage Match Custodian and Bogspine Knuckles are the reason why your deck wins. So the game, knowing that it wins more games, is going to give you those options more likely than not because it understands that Evolve Shaman needs its evolve mechanics in order to win the game. So this raises a very interesting question of that if the game actually does like have like a slight favorability towards those cards that have a slightly higher win rate, because especially when it comes to Evolve Shaman, it feels like every single time that I go up against one, they immediately have that Bogspine Knuckle after they played Cage Match Custodian on 2, and unfortunately on turn 3, there's Lightning Bloom and Dread Corsar to immediately follow with it, and I don't know about you guys, but it seems like every single time I go up against this deck, it always happens. So maybe there's something in the coding to where it gives Shaman their evolve mechanics more often than not. Up next, we're highlighting everybody's favorite Hunter 2-drop, Imprisoned Felmaw. And according to Saren, Imprisoned Felmaw rolls a 50-50 to either hit face or minions regardless of how many minions there are on the board. So even if there's 7 minions on the field and only 1 face, it's not a 1 in 8, it's a 50-50 every single time. And honestly, I feel like a lot of people in the Hearthstone community would actually agree with this statement, even though it's mathematically not correct. Who needs math when you just have intuition to know that Imprisoned Felmaw is just going to hit face every single time? Like, and if it doesn't hit face, then it's just going to hit the best minion on the field. So you know that Imprisoned Felmaw definitely has something going on in the Matrix, because who knows what really decides where Imprisoned Felmaw is going to hit. Because I really feel like more times than not, it actually has hit face, and I don't want to say that I'm using my confirmation bias here or anything like that, because I don't play Hunter. I only watch people play Hunter, and every single time that I watch this card hit face, it is always happening. This next one is for all the rogue players out there, because if you love playing Lackeys, then you're probably already familiar that Togwaggle will just automatically appear in your hand whenever your opponent doesn't trade into the Lackeys. And honestly, I've played up enough rogues to kind of believe this one as well. There are so many situations where Rogue has so many access to Lackeys and so many ways of just generating what seems to be infinite amounts of them, to where playing it with High Spare and Togwaggle is just always going to be the end result. And unfortunately, even if you like try to clear the board to the best of your ability, even if that one minion is still left on the field, all it is gonna do is create a crown or a wonder swan for your opponent, and suddenly coming back onto the board is almost impossible unless your opponent low rolls. But Lackeys and Togwaggles is always one of those cards that you gotta pay an extra bit of attention to, because if not, the Lackey will definitely work in synergy with it every single time. There's no way your opponent is not gonna take a free wand or a free crown. This next conspiracy is probably the one that I believe the most on this list, but is after losing a game, not drawing a decisive card in the last turn, such as heal, removal, or damage, that exact card comes to the mulligan or is the first card drawn in the next game. Happens so much to me. Same here, Peary, same here. Again, as a combo player, there's a lot of times where I'm just trying to hit these very specific cards, and say, for example, I needed Emperor Thorson in order to trigger my combo, in order to begin to do my highlight. There's a lot of times where it just doesn't appear into my hand, and then immediately in the next game, Thorson is right in the mulligan, and it makes me furious every single time, because it's like, why? Why? The game knew, okay? The game knew that I needed this card, and it just straight up said no. Why, Hearthstone? Why would you deny me my memes? And the same thing happens in competitive play all the time too. Like, say you just needed like a fireball in order to kill off your opponent, and then suddenly top deck after top deck after top deck, the game just knows, and it will not give you that last bit of damage in order to win the game. And then, you know, you're angry because you didn't win that next game. You immediately queue up another game, and then what's immediately in your mulligan? Not just one fireball, but sometimes two fireballs. And that's just, that has to be a conspiracy, man. Like, I have no idea why that happens so consistently from game in and game out. This next conspiracy goes out to everyone who's ever missed lethal before. Because guess what? You will be punished. You will be punished if you misplayed or if you miss lethal. And that is a conspiracy that I 100% can get behind, because there are so many instances where I was 1 damage, 1 mana, or I just miscounted the cards that I had in hand, or just miscalculated the resources that I had, that essentially made me lose a game. And unfortunately, I really feel like the game just has this sixth sense to where, oh hey, I can do the math myself. I can calculate that, you know, this fireball was lethal, and you know, this player missed it, so now that this player has missed lethal, the other player deserves the win, right? And that's just how the game sometimes just processes itself, I believe. Like, it just decides that this is going to be the winner of the game no matter what happens. And to prove my point, I'm actually going to bring up a little story from when I was playing back in DreamHack Montreal in 2018. This is when the dream for top 16 was still alive, but I was fighting a specific player who I'm not going to name because he knows who he is if he's watching this video. But regardless, it was a Death Rattle Hunter mirror back in the days with Deathstalker Rexar. And I specifically needed to find a minion that not only gave me healing, but also could have rush and deal with my opponent. So essentially what I needed was a very cheap minion to go with a Vicious Scalehide. And I believe I ended up hitting a Plated Beetle, so it actually was the perfect card that I needed. But unfortunately, in this specific game, I didn't play around secrets. The animations were unfortunately eating up into my rope turn, and I didn't play around the secrets well enough, and unfortunately, I didn't get my lifesteal because my opponent had Freezing Trap up, and I did not play around the animations or the secrets since I was so rushed by the rope. But regardless, why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because I knew for a fact that my opponent, who had already played a kill command, had only one other bit of damage in their deck in order to kill me for exact lethal, and my opponent only had 11 cards left, and guess what was the one card that came off the top? Of course it was Kill Command. Of course they were going to kill me immediately. So unfortunately for me, my top 16 dreams were crushed because that set was very determined on who won that first game. But it just proves my point even more that when the game knows that you made a objective misplay, it is going to do everything in its power in order to make sure that you cannot win the game. Oh my god, I still cannot forgive myself. But regardless, guys, don't miss lethal, and then the game won't punish you. And those are the 9 Hearthstone conspiracies that I believe were the best on the thread that I posted on Twitter. But there was one comment in particular that just made me laugh, so I thought that I'd give it an honorable mention just to make it an even 10. But that is the second Lackey is 1 in 13. If you guys aren't familiar with this joke, there was I forget how long ago it was, but Monsanto, one of the Grandmasters, had a highlight that was that was under a little bit of controversy because people were like, why was Monsanto going for the evil miscreant when it was better for him to go with like a one generated Lackey play? And I don't know the specifics behind it, but essentially people were arguing that it is a 1 in 13 in order to hit the same Lackey after you hit one Lackey that you want. So I just thought it was a really, really funny joke, because it just brought me back to when people were discussing this really flawed sense of thinking. And that's one thing that I want to highlight with this video. Like, there's a difference between bad mathematics and conspiracies. But regardless, I hope you guys enjoyed these Hearthstone conspiracies that maybe make you think about the game just a little bit harder. I hope you guys enjoy the content. And if you have any conspiracies yourself that I did not cover, feel free to put them in the comments below, because I would love to put on my tinfoil hat with you guys and see what exactly is wrong with Hearthstone coding. And as a quick reminder, don't forget, if you guys like this content, to like and to subscribe to the channel. I'd love to do more videos like this, so if there's any topics that you guys want me to discuss, feel free to put them down in the comments below, and I would love to have a conversation with you guys. But until then, we're going to be working on some highlight clips and on some more of these kind of videos, because I'm going to be making as much daily content as we possibly can. I hope you guys enjoy this list of Hearthstone conspiracies, and we'll see you for the next video.